Sydney Watson is suing the Blaze, and the question is, does she have a solid lawsuit, or is it more of a lull suit? We're going to go ahead and take a dive into the claims made in the lawsuit, as well as the relevant parties associated with the suit itself, here on The Breakdown. Hey, this is Greg Hoyt from The Breakdown. If you're new here and checking out the channel on YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also, feel free to follow me on Twitter at GregHoytLET. Anyway, let's get on to the video. So, chances are most of my viewers already know that earlier in February, Sydney Watson filed suit against The Blaze, her former employer, where she had a show co-hosted alongside Elijah Schaffer called You Are Here, which ran for a few months between late 2021 and early 2022 before it abruptly ended and we were kind of all hanging in limbo wondering what exactly happened. Now, according to the claims laid out in the lawsuit, Sydney Watson is basically telling a tale that a hostile work environment was fomented under the Blaze's leadership, or really more so based upon the conduct acted out by her co-host, Elijah Schaffer, which Sydney asserts that the Blaze's leadership didn't really do enough to address the hostile work environment. In short, Sydney is claiming two contributing factors to what created or fomented this alleged hostile work environment. Sydney is claiming that she underwent sex-based discrimination and also religious-based discrimination, which, those are arguably big no-nos in the realm of EEOC and federal and state law. I'll go ahead and also leave a link to the lawsuit itself in the description of the video, so that way folks can read through the entire 17-page document. But in this video, we're going to predominantly highlight what are the largest claims or the largest assertions made by Sydney against the Blaze and by extension against Elijah Schaffer. So contained within the 17 pages of this lawsuit, there's a lot of stuff, and it's largely focusing on comments made by Elijah Schaffer during his and Sydney's time on the show You Are Here. Now, for those who aren't familiar with it, it was a Blaze-produced, political commentary show that was, rife with some crass, crude humor and stuff like that. And they did a lot of episodes focusing on, COVID mandates and lockdowns and LGBTQ fanaticism. I mean, there was a little over 100 episodes of this, kind of commentary podcast show where Eliza and Sydney co-hosted the effort. Now, as mentioned earlier, Sydney is claiming that a lot of this, hostility, this work-related hostility, the hostile work environment, came from Elijah's comments on air and some comments off air. And she also points to YouTube super chats as being a source of a hostile work environment. But again, this was a live interactive show, so the nature of YouTube comments coming in, I just don't really see that as actionable. But I digress. Now, what is really interesting in the lawsuit that Sydney has brought forth against the Blaze, she's largely claiming she was completely blindsided by the content of the show, the type of comments Elijah Schaffer would make on air, the nature of the guests, so on and so forth. She claimed that she had no idea that the show would be anything like this, kind of holding up the Blaze as being like this moral beacon of every piece of content that they have is just the epitome of clean-cut, cookie-cutter, conservative commentary stuff. And, I find that to be a largely disingenuous assertion in the lawsuit. I mean, it's not as though Sydney Watson didn't know who the Blaze was or who the Blaze currently had on the roster at the time or who they previously employed. This is the Blaze that had Steven Crowder, that had Gavin McInnes, that had John Miller. And what Sydney Watson is claiming is that she was completely blindsided by the fact that what You Are Here was more in line with some of the Blaze's other programming, like Steven Crowder, like former Gavin McInnes, and so on and so forth. In that, yes, it did focus on politics and it did focus on culture, but there was a bit of a humorous spin. Like, for reference, when it comes to Steven Crowder's show, there's no shortage of jokes that poke fun at gender and race and the LGBTQ and all that stuff, and religion. There's no shortage of that sort of stuff. So for Sydney Watson to claim that she wasn't expecting anything that could even be potentially lateral to what Steven Crowder's program is, I find that, again, just to be extremely disingenuous, and I don't think she's doing herself any favors by, presenting this kind of naivety or, I was completely surprised narrative in the lawsuit, because there are also other issues regarding her past and Elijah Schaffer's past, which again demonstrate she should have known what she was walking into if she legitimately didn't. For one, Sydney Watson is pointing at Elijah Schaffer for comments made on air pertaining to her being an atheist, pertaining to him making misogynistic comments, so on and so forth. And it doesn't really give a lot of details on what these misogynistic comments are. It just says references to misogynistic stuff and so on and so forth. The only true reference that I could find in this lawsuit that like really highly detailed something that could be construed as misogynistic or sexually offensive is a joke Elijah made on Twitter. And again, that joke on Twitter, Sydney Watson is trying to claim that since they were part and parcel to an online interactive show, everything Elijah Schaffer did online is somehow tantamount to creating a hostile work environment. Which that's kind of a dicey claim too. That's kind of a shifty, kind of a dicey claim. I don't know if that's going to hold up very well. And that post in question, it was one from April of last year where Sebastian Gorka was making reference to a particularly contentious episode of You Are Here where Jack Murphy, yelled at Sydney Watson. And Gorka was, basically, talking smack to Elijah on Twitter. And Elijah just responded back with, "I hope she sees this and sleeps with you." And as evidenced by the tweet, Elijah didn't even say Sydney's name directly, nor did Sebastian Gorka say Sydney's name. It appears to be, based upon the context, people could, perceive that's who they were referring to, or at least who Sebastian was referring to, and then by extension Elijah. But again, he doesn't even specifically say her name. And again, this is extremely questionable as to whether that tweet alone can contribute to a hostile work environment. Also, let's take a look at the background of these two content creators, all right? Elijah Schaffer and Sydney Watson, ironically, they both kind of hit big on YouTube right around the same time. They really started making some good traction in 2018. And this is why I say that Sydney Watson should have known what she was getting into if she legitimately just had no idea that Elijah Schaffer has a bit of a crass and crude sense of humor. Ironically, some of Elijah Schaffer's most popular videos on his original YouTube channel, Slightly Offensive, come from 2018. Videos where he would be, mocking and lampooning and challenging folks associated with Black Lives Matter and folks who are part of protests pertaining to pro-LGBTQ stuff and all that. Literally hours and hours and hours of footage dating back years before the start of You Are Here ever went into effect that demonstrated and showcased that Elijah Schaffer, he's got a unique sense of humor and that he would often make jokes that, could be digested as offensive. I mean, that's what his channel was called, Slightly Offensive. Now, in Sydney's lawsuit, she's described as a serious journalist. Now, bear in mind, her rise to fame on YouTube, once again, kind of coincided around the same time as Elijah Schaffer. And when you go back to content of Sydney Watson's from 2018, 2019, the videos that really made her big and helped establish her brand, basically her entire shtick was riding the wave of the anti-feminism, anti-SJW stuff, where she would make videos poking fun at third wave feminists. She would make videos poking fun at fat people. Her bread and butter, her entire brand was built upon her just kind of being a funny commentary person, poking fun at things that were generally well received on YouTube's algorithm around that 2018, 2019 timeframe. Also, it is a little bit ironic that, Sydney Watson, from one of her old videos that again were, during that 2018, 2019 timeframe, that was really popular, she was, talking about women ruining the workplace based upon frivolous harassment complaints and what have you. So, I mean, there is a little bit of rich irony in that. Sydney claimed in her lawsuit that when she joined up with You Are Here, it was not meant to be a sexually explicit show, nor was it intended to be actively misogynistic. But crude humor isn't the same as sexually explicit content, and the assertion the show in its entirety was actively misogynistic is quite a broad overreach. The show ran from September of 2021 up until April of 2022, rendering about 134 episodes. And of those 134 episodes, there were female guests that appeared dozens of times throughout the show's history. I mean, for a show that was purportedly actively misogynistic, it seemed like it was quite a welcoming environment for women to come on and to be platformed and have their profile boosted. Furthermore, in the lawsuit, Sydney claims that the choice of guests compounded Miss Watson's growing discomfort with the anti-female tone of the show. So look at the verbiage of that. Sydney is saying that the growing number of guests, compounded the anti-female tone of the show. So once again, we're talking about 134 episodes. And exactly how many people does Sydney Watson name in the lawsuit that are key figures to this growing number of anti-female guests? She names 2, Nick Fuentes and Jack Murphy, both of whom appeared on the show in December of 2021. Now, it is a little bit interesting that Sydney Watson is complaining about Nick Fuentes having appeared on You Are Here back in December of 2021, acting as though that she was completely surprised by, what did she say, his bigotry and so on and so forth. But once again, it's kind of funny because on the September 15th episode of You Are Here, Sydney Watson admitted that she was well aware of who Nick Fuentes was. She was going to be okay with him being invited on the show, and she was very aware of some of his stances that she disagreed with, but she was open to platforming him.
Hydra P has sent a lot. I guess this is like you're a regular viewer of the show. Welcome to the show. It says, Sydney, when will you get over your freedom of speech phobia and ask Nick Fuentes to come on this show?
Why is this on me?
I don't know. Nick Fuentes can't fly right now, too. So there's a number one factor is he can't fly. I know Nick personally, and I have no problem with him. People don't like him for reasons. I have no problem with him.
I've never spoken about Nick in the context of inviting him on.
You just disagree with his stance on women.
I just disagree with a bunch of his stances, but that doesn't mean that I wouldn't.
If he was here in DFW, we would have him on the show.
Seriously, I'm not anti-platforming people.
That's not a freedom of speech issue.
Exactly.
But on this show specifically, we would have him on the show.
This is the thing, right? You interrogate ideas, and if it's a bad idea. You use a better idea to beat it. I don't understand. I'm fine with that. Elijah Bloody said, let's invite on the satanic people.
Appearing to be disingenuous in a lawsuit regarding her claims, it's not exactly a good look. Because nowhere in the lawsuit does, it reference that Sydney Watson was okay with Nick Fuentes originally coming on the program months before he actually dropped in. She instead, claims that it was an experience that she absolutely loathed and detested and didn't want anything to do with. But that is a complete lie, based upon her own words during that September 15th, 2021 episode, where she was all for him coming on. Moving on to the Jack Murphy portion of the complaint. Sydney Watson was mentioning how she felt really uncomfortable that, Jack Murphy had an outburst and yelled at her. And don't get me wrong, that crap that Murphy pulled, that wasn't cool. That was some weak stuff. But also, at the same time, she beelines to saying that, she was upset that Elijah didn't do anything or do anything more. But here's the thing. Jack Murphy was a guest on the program. He dropped an F-bomb on Sydney, saying F you to the fullest or something like that. Now, whether or not people agree with Elijah Schaffer's actions or inaction during those moments, he's not legally required to white knight for the co-host of his show. I mean, no matter how you shake the Constitution, federal law, state law, whatever, EEOC, no matter how you shake that up, there's just no way that another person has to be compelled to white knight for somebody. And that's basically what Sydney Watson was complaining about. She was complaining that Jack Murphy said some mean words to her on the show, and Elijah didn't really do anything and step in the moment to chastise Jack Murphy or get him to stop doing it or protect her honor. That's just not actionable stuff. Sydney's lawsuit also mentions when You Are Here returned from its break in early January 2022, Mr. Schaffer unilaterally booked several additional guests with particularly contemptible and sexist opinions toward women, typically without consulting Miss Watson or letting her know the extent of these opinions. Now, this is another interesting, claim made by Sydney Watson in the lawsuit, because number one, you don't see anybody in particular named, who are these people with the sexist opinions. You don't see that. But I guess the best thing that we can do, the Blaze still has the You Are Here episodes archived. We could just see all the guests who were booked and appeared during the month of January 2022 to see who these contemptible people were. All right, look at this. We've got Marie Oakes, Jorge Ventura, Blair White, John Doyle, someone who'd been previously on the show back in 2021, obviously, Isabella Riley, Eric July, AJ Wilms, Taylor Hanson, Chris Coles, Alex Stein, Buck Angel, Sarah Gonzalez, Keisha Schaffer, Steve Deese, Kai Schwemmer, and John Miller. Now, based upon, the names mentioned right there, if I had to, fathom a guess without, necessarily going through all those episodes and watching the entire month of January's episodes, I guess if you were going to have, maybe some potentially sexist or misogynistic jokes come from people, my money would probably be on, the AJ Wilms guy, because he does say some, off-the-wall stuff, and John Miller. But also, this is the same John Miller who was previously employed by the Blaze. But also you see other people, you see actual transgender individuals on there, like Blair White and, Buck Angel. This is hardly a who's who list of contemptible people. So without Sydney Watson explicitly naming who these contemptible characters are, and we can see the list of the names provided on the Blaze's website on who was on their show, it's again one of those things where I'm just not seeing the connection. It's not making sense. It doesn't seem like a good, solid argument. Moving on to the claims of religious discrimination. Here's what the suit mentions of the fact. Mr. Schaffer would also consistently make disrespectful comments about the fact Miss Watson is an atheist. This also encouraged the audience to attack her, something she must still put up with today, and that did not happen before Mr. Schaffer made it an issue. So the YouTube super chat stuff, again, that's irrelevant. You can't necessarily blame the employer when you signed up to be on an interactive show where the people interacting with the content is saying stuff you don't like. The employer doesn't have any control over what commenters put on YouTube or super chats or anything, so that's a bunk claim. As for the religious discrimination part, let's take a look at what the EEOC has to say based upon the type of claims that Sydney Watson is making and see how they line up with religious discrimination. According to the EEOC, harassment can include, for example, offensive remarks about a person's religious beliefs or practices. Although the law doesn't prohibit simple teasing, offhand comments, or isolated incidents that aren't very serious, harassment is illegal when it is so frequent or severe that it creates a hostile or offensive work environment, or when it results in an adverse employment decision, such as the victim being fired or demoted. With as vague as Sydney Watson's claims are regarding, Elijah Schaffer's comments about atheism, that could easily fall under the simple teasing portion, the simple teasing exoneration aspect of the EEOC's definition regarding, workplace harassment under anti-religious sentiments. But another important thing to take into account is, these alleged comments Elijah Schaffer made, kind of poking fun at atheism or poking fun at Sydney Watson's atheism, is the venue in which they occurred, which these comments, these jokes, these teasing elements, whatever, they transpired on a talk show. And what constitutes a hostile work environment on a talk show versus, other workplaces is very different. Because you have to keep in mind, the venue in which both Sydney and Elijah operated was one where they would both Elijah and Sydney, would routinely mock and denigrate and poke fun at people who were overweight, members of the LGBTQ community, so on and so forth, thereby completely watering down the claims of her being offended over comments she found objectionable, and also further refuting, the claims that she makes early on in the lawsuit that what she signed up for was, some kind of suit and tie gig that was nothing but a wholesome fest. And again, that segues to another important element. When it comes to an allegedly hostile work environment, the nature of the work environment itself is just as important to consider as the alleged contributing elements that fomented this purportedly hostile work environment. Basically, what would make a hostile work environment at one workplace necessarily wouldn't make a actionable hostile work environment in another place. Here, let's do a little bit of a test, have a little bit of fun with this. I'm going to list off a couple of hypothetical workplace scenarios. Ones where I'm sure, though, that if you read the vague assertion in there, you would say, yep, no, this would absolutely be a slam dunk hostile work environment case. How about being regularly exposed to pornographic material by your employer? How about being habitually exposed to assaults and in-person nudity? How about being exposed to ostensibly racist or sexist comments on a regular basis? I mean, those three elements ostensibly do sound like something that should contribute to a hostile work environment and should be actionable, right? Well, again, not necessarily. It boils down to where that transpired. I mean, for the pornography scenario, you wouldn't be able to claim a hostile work environment if you were working at an adult bookstore. And for the assaults and frequent in-person nudity scenario, You wouldn't be able to claim a hostile work environment if you were working in a jail or a prison. And being exposed to racist or sexist comments on a regular basis, you wouldn't be able to make that claim if they were in the context of, say, working at a comedy club. Again, when you take the venue into consideration, what can be a hostile work environment in one place is not a hostile work environment in another place in terms of being legally actionable, even if the elements of the job makes the person quit. In short, I genuinely believe that Sydney Watson either knew or should have known what she was getting into when she signed up to be the co-host on You Are Here for the Blaze. And now I'm thinking she might have some kind of a case of buyer's remorse after quitting when she potentially bit off more than she could chew. Now, this doesn't mean the Blaze won't try to settle this out of court. There is a high likelihood that the folks over the Blaze will be like, hey, it would just be easier if we settle this. And that's fine, that's their prerogative. But my diagnosis, this is more of a lawsuit than a serious lawsuit. Anyways, guys, that's pretty much the long and short of it. Go ahead and leave your comments, thoughts below, whether you think my take is just completely off the mark, or whether you agree, or, just whatever you think about the matter. That was the breakdown. Peace.